All right, good evening, everybody. It is just a few minutes after 5:30 on Thursday, August the 4th. This is our Town of Spencer pre-agenda meeting for the month of August. And the purpose of tonight's meeting is to review our upcoming agenda for next Tuesday's regular meeting. And we do have all of our board members here tonight, so we will begin with an invocation and then the Pledge of Allegiance. So I will give our invocation tonight. Father, we thank you so much for the many, many blessings that you shower upon our town and our staff and our board. We thank you for the positions that you have put us in. We thank you for the opportunities that you give us each day in this town to make it a better place for all. Please grant us wisdom and discernment both tonight and Tuesday night as we make decisions for our town and our residents and our businesses and those that visit us as well. Thank you for each of the board members that sit beside me and for the staff members that are here tonight and those that are not, that serve our town tirelessly and very well on a daily basis. Amen. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, so we have several public hearings to be held this evening before we get to the review of our agenda. And so the first is a public hearing related to a satellite annexation for the property line for the Yadkin River Park Trailhead. As you know, the Town of Spencer limits actually do include the North Carolina Finishing Company site, but because the right-of-way for the new Yadkin River Trailhead was a part of NCDOT, it wasn't technically in the Spencer town limits, and now that DOT has granted that right-of-way to the Town of Spencer, one of the formalities we have to go through is actually annexing that piece of property into the Spencer town limits. So, Mr. Blunt, you want to say anything additional on that before we open for the public hearing?
Since we don't have any public here, I'll be very brief.
All right.
You heard the presentation on this last month. As the mayor pointed out, this is an annexation of about a 1 acre sliver where the Yadkin River Park Trailhead will be built. It's almost adjacent to the Wilcox Bridge and is bracketed by the North Carolina Finishing property and Highway 29. We've gone through the various steps required by state statute to get to this point where you will have a public hearing, and then at your meeting Tuesday, we'll ask you to vote to annex this property in. Be glad to answer any questions.
All right, any questions at this point? Okay, hearing none, we will formally open the public hearing. So I am not seeing anyone here in person tonight, but we will give an opportunity if anybody wants to speak on it, including staff. All right, seeing none. Has there been any written correspondence, Ms. Craven?
I have not received any correspondence.
Okay, thank you very much. So given that we do not have any public comment on this, is there a motion from the board to close the public hearing this evening on this matter?
I move to close public hearing.
All right, there's a motion by Ms. Sledge.
Second.
Second by Mr. Muhammad. All in favor? Okay. All opposed? All right, public hearing is now closed. Thank you. Next item is another public hearing. This is also related to the Yadkin River Park and for the trailhead, and because of the property use at this point and the zoning at this point, it does require a rezoning for civic purposes to make it a trailhead. Mr. Blunt, I'll turn it back over to you for additional commentary.
I will comment on the previous one. I did get one phone call asking that in the future when we advertise these that we actually give a simple address of the property or a simple identification. By state statute, we have to give a meets and bounds description, which is to the average person a very complex description of where the property is. So next time we do this, and we've got others in the near future, we'll actually say parcel number such and such. Okay. As far as this, once you annex a property, obviously it was under somebody else's zoning jurisdiction prior to that annexation. Statute gives us 60 days to change the zoning We thought we'd do it concurrently with the annexation process. So we're asking that you have a public hearing tonight to take comments on our suggestion to rezone, which is Rowan County's zoning classification, rural agricultural, which really means do anything you want to with your property, to our zoning classification, which is CIV for civic, which is appropriate for the park.
Okay. Any questions at this point on that item for Mr. Blunt? Okay. You have one?
Mr. Blunt, I'll just clarify. I had someone ask me if CIV meant it was tax exempt, and I think that is correct. Is that right?
The fact that it's owned by the town makes it tax exempt. The
Okay.
classification
The
is
classification
really
is not.
irrelevant as far as taxation goes, but because the town owns it, we don't pay taxes.
Okay, but church properties and things like that that are marked CIV.
Churches don't pay property taxes because they're churches, not because of their zoning classification. I could zone your house CIV and you'd still have to pay property tax.
Okay.
Sorry.
I guess conversely, there could be a church that is probably an allowable use in, for example, a residential zoning district. It wouldn't affect the tax implications.
Thank you. All right, so at this time, we will open this public hearing. And again, seeing no one here tonight with us in person, I'll ask Ms. Craven, have we received any written correspondence?
No.
Okay, very good. So with that, is there a motion to close this public hearing?
So move.
Motion by Mr. Muhammad. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mayor Pro Tem. All in favor? All opposed? All right, and that public hearing is now closed. And we have another public hearing for 160D text amendments to the Spencer Development Ordinance. It's attachment 3 in your agenda packet. Mr. Blunt.
These are obviously very exciting issues in our public today. To bring out so many people to speak for or against these. These were actually text amendments. Let me preface this by saying when you adopted your new development ordinance, the company that worked with you on that, In Focus, part of their agreement was to do periodic updates as required by statutory changes. That's what these text amendments are. They're recommended by In Focus based on their latest interpretation of 160D and their requirements. I have read through them, compared them to the old language. I don't see that these make any substantive changes in anything we're doing. If you have detailed questions, I'll be glad to answer you on Tuesday night, because I couldn't tell you tonight any real detailed answer. But if you have questions, please ask. I'll be glad to investigate for you.
Okay. So with that, we'll open that public hearing for 160D text amendments to our Spencer Development Ordinance. And again, seeing that we have no one here in person tonight, I will ask Ms. Craven if we've received any written correspondence.
No correspondence.
Okay, thank you. And hearing that we do have no public input on this matter, is there a motion to close this public hearing?
So moved.
Motion by Mayor Pro Tem. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Miller. All in favor? All right. All opposed? All right. That public hearing is now closed. And finally, we have one more public hearing, and this is related to Section 2.19 text amendments for payment in lieu for required sidewalks for development.
This one's just a wee bit more exciting. In various places in your development ordinance where certain things are required by the ordinance, such as open space or tree preservation or a few other things that I bump into from time to time, there's also a requirement that sidewalks be provided for all major subdivisions, residential subdivisions, all commercial developments, and all industrial developments. In some cases, the requirement for sidewalks just doesn't make any sense, but we still require them to build the sidewalk, even if it doesn't make any sense. What this does is allow the contractor to request of you, and you have to approve it, to pay the town the value of the sidewalks instead of actually installing them. and then the town would use that money to build sidewalks somewhere else where they make better sense. So it falls to you to make a decision. There are examples, and the examples change every day. We've got a major subdivision going in off of Long Ferry Road. It will be isolated from other residential areas, commercial areas. The requirement for a sidewalk will connect those 7 lots, but that's about all it would do. You can't go anywhere on the sidewalk. That contractor is interested in using the payment in lieu of option if you decide to adopt it. With all the development on Long Ferry Road, I'm not sure, but what I would advise you to reject that request. We might need sidewalks on Long Ferry before you know it. But right now, it probably doesn't make sense to put sidewalks there. So that's the purpose of this amendment, is to give us that option to allow you to accept payment in lieu of the sidewalks in places where it just doesn't make sense.
Thank you, Mr. Blunt. Are there questions at this point from the board?
Again, Mr. Blunt, we have talked about Charles Street on a number of occasions with traffic and the kids and all that sort of thing. When my house was built, it was part of a development, and there were no sidewalks then, and I'm sure that at that point there were no requirements for a contractor or a developer to put in sidewalks. Will we run into that same sort of thing down the road? Would this be a blanket thing?
Your requirement right now is a blanket requirement on new development. So if a new major subdivision, which is 4 lots or more, is built, they have to put sidewalks in.
Right.
On existing lots within the town, in your neighborhood or anywhere, if an existing lot is developed, if a house is built on it, they're not required to put a sidewalk in. That's not one of the requirements of the ordinance. So it's just for new development where this would apply.
I just wonder if there had been a requirement for that years ago, would we have sidewalks all through town?
If you ride through town, you see a patchwork quilt of sidewalks. In a clean slate, you would want sidewalks everywhere. To get sidewalks everywhere now will be very difficult and very expensive. What this does is draws a line in the sand. Well, really, the adoption of your development ordinance drew that line and said we want sidewalks in all new developments. But there will be occasions where they just don't make sense. And all this does is allow you that option of when it really doesn't make sense to put a sidewalk in, they can pay you the value of it and you can go somewhere else and build a sidewalk there.
So
It would be on a case-to-case basis then?
Yes, ma'am.
and up to the board to
Right,
make that
right.
decision. Yeah.
Mhm.
So, it would give us flexibility if for some reason there's some type of development going in, perhaps an industrial development or something like that, that it doesn't make sense to put sidewalks in. That would give us the flexibility then to be able to repurpose that for something like Charles Street and Oakwood Drive, where it makes sense to put those in, and to address some of those issues. The other example I would use is I guess out on Sowers Ferry Road, the development out there is newer development for Spencer that does not have sidewalks. Yep.
Steeplechase area.
Yeah, and I would say, I guess up in my neighborhood, it's similar as well. And some of those isolated locations maybe don't make sense to have the sidewalk, but the money that would have been used for that under our current ordinance really could go to other uses for sidewalks in town.
I'll throw one out that might come before you in the future. There's a 4-lot subdivision right down from the high school. There's no sidewalks there now, and yet by our ordinance, he's required to put in a section of sidewalks in front of those 4 lots. It's not going to connect on anything on either end. He probably would just as soon pay you the money not to build that sidewalk. But this board has identified that highway as a corridor where our urban greenway might go. So we really do want sidewalks in that area. So in that case, you would probably vote to turn them down and say, put that 4-house section of sidewalks in. We'll connect to the other ends eventually. I see a question.
Maybe a couple. What's the cost per linear foot of sidewalk?
It varies tremendously. A lot of ordinances actually put a dollar amount in so that you will be able to predict it very quickly. In the very case I'm talking about, there's a culvert that comes to the edge of the road right away. He's going to actually have to extend that culvert to build the sidewalk. And therefore, the extension of the culvert is part of the cost of the sidewalk. So if we allow him not to build the sidewalks, he has to include the cost of the culverts in his estimate. He has to prepare an estimate and present it to us, and we have to accept it as being a reasonable amount for the particular sidewalks in question.
Is this the property low lying?
Mm-hmm.
Whitehead.
The one that has flood problems, they're still struggling with. Yes, sir.
Just food for thought. I would imagine expensive for a linear foot. I don't want to drop a grenade in the conversation. It's unrelated to this, but just food for thought for the future. Is that too low of a requirement for homes? I know we don't have a lot of land. We don't have 80 home subdivisions, but is that too low in your opinion? Is that deterring growth? Let me ask it that way.
The requirement for sidewalk?
Yeah, on 4 homes, 4 lots.
No, I don't think it deters growth. It's almost an expected requirement in most urban ordinances now to require sidewalks.
Other questions? All right, thank you, Mr. Blunt. And with that, we'll open the public hearing for this evening. Again, no one from the public here this evening to speak on the matter. Have we received any written correspondence?
No correspondence.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Craven. And hearing that we have no public input on this matter, is there a motion to close this hearing?
I move to close the public hearing.
All right, it's a motion by Ms. Sledge.
Second.
Second by Mr. Muhammad. All in favor? All right, all opposed? And the public hearing is closed. And so with that, we will move into our review of the August 9th agenda for next Tuesday. Is there a volunteer that's willing to give the invocation on Tuesday night?
I will.
All right, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. All right, and then we'll have the approval of minutes for our July 7th pre-agenda meeting and our July 12th regular agenda meet. And so with that, Ms. Sledge, I think you've had a chance to review. Are there any additions, clarifications, or corrections that are needed to those minutes?
I do not believe so.
Okay, hearing none.
I've got, in terms of adding to the agenda.
We'll do that momentarily. Okay. Yep.
All right.
Yep. Okay. All right. So do we want to add the minutes to the consent agenda? Everybody good with that? Okay. All right. And then we will have additions or deletions and adoption of the agenda, but let's discuss if there are any things tonight that we want to add or remove from the agenda. Mr. Morgan.
There's a gentleman by the name of Ricky Lanier who lives in Davidson County.
Mm-hmm.
He contacted me about 2 months ago. He's going around various municipalities and putting In God We Trust in aluminum anodized letters and also in vinyl on municipal buildings and police vehicles. And he wants to make a presentation. Probably take 10, 15 minutes.
Okay. Let's do that. Let's do that immediately after public comment if the board's agreeable to it. Does that work for everyone?
And Mike, he may have a presentation. Should he contact you via email or come earlier Tuesday night to it? Go.
Okay. All right. Anything else, Mr. Morgan? Okay. Thank you. Anything else that needs to be added? Mr. Miller.
I'd like to make a suggestion as far as Tuesday night's meeting, and I'd like to make a suggestion in relating to, I'd like to see the town make and adopt a plan for and hire an architect for the expansion of the fire department.
Okay. So let's. Where would you like to add that? We've got a packed agenda.
I just, at the time being, I just would like to make a motion that we look into hiring an architect for this plan.
Okay.
What if it went down with some of the budget amendments? Would that be an appropriate place to
Well,
put
I'm
it?
wondering that, or if there's any other project-related items where we should put it.
We're talking about the murals.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it as item 20, right after the mural update. Does that work? Right before we do the budget amendments.
Steve, is that the motion that I thought I was going to say?
No, I'm waiting for you to make that one a little bit later. Yeah.
So we don't necessarily have to have a motion just to add it to the agenda if the group is in general consensus to add it for discussion. You good with that? Okay.
And if I could just remind everyone, we do have that project funded in the budget this year.
Right.
And so certainly that's.
Okay. I'd like to see us get started in
Well,
if that's the case.
Yeah, sooner the better.
Okay. All right. Anything else that needs to be added? Okay. All right. Well, let's go through and review. Remember, if there's anything that you want to add to the consent agenda, just let us know. Any items that might not need further discussion.
The public hearing, excuse me, the public hearings we just had, those things go to the consent agenda.
Related to the items on the consent agenda. They could, unless Mr. Blunt feels like that there's particular updates, additional presentation you need to give us on Tuesday on any of those matters. Yeah. All right, so we'll keep those. Okay. Recognitions. We do have a proclamation on Women's Equality Day, and so I will give that. Are there any other recognitions that we would like to make?
Mr. Mayor, I would like to have just a brief period at some point about the Women's Equality Day to speak to the Equal Rights Amendment.
Okay.
In conjunction with Women's Equality Day.
So I will. Let's do that immediately following the proclamation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Other recognitions.
I'd like to welcome the students back. They start the next day
Okay.
at all three schools.
All right. Others. I'd like to make a recognition of staff that were involved in our national night out, just to thank them, and as well as the community for coming out, and not everybody that participated and helped plan that. So I'll do that.
Maybe recognize our dragon boat people.
Go ahead and make that motion, Steve.
I told you I'd second it. Go ahead and make it.
Beautiful.
I'm going to let Steve do that. With great ideas come great responsibility. Great. All right. Anything else? Okay. If anything comes up between now and then, just let us know, and we will be sure to add that for recognitions. All right. We'll then have public comment. We'll then have the presentation that Mr. Morgan asked for. We'll then approve consent agenda items, and then we'll get into the meat of the agenda. The first item is to consider awarding a contract for construction of the Yadkin River Trailhead and authorizing the town manager to finalize and execute the construction contract. We did take bids today on that. I know Ms. Sledge was present for that. I was present. And the general short summary is the base bids came in right about where our budget was. but we have some ad alternates, 3 different ad alternates for additional things that would complete the full plan as we've seen it. And with that, we are a little short on the budget, but staff will be working through some different funding mechanisms and things like that between now and next week, and Joe can provide an update for us at that time. Okay. The next item would be to consider authorizing the mayor to execute an agreement with the North Carolina Department of Commerce for a rural transformation grant, and I believe Kyle will be giving us an update on that.
That would actually be Joe.
I'm sorry.
Yep.
I'm sorry. I'm thinking CDBG.
Yep.
So that'll be Joe as well. Okay. Very good. And we have gotten the agreement from the Department of Commerce on that grant, and so it's a matter of just now executing that agreement, and the board needs to approve that, so we can review the specifics of that on Tuesday.
Now, I will mention, if it's okay, that item and the item following 9 and 10 have corresponding budget amendments. If you look down at 20 and 21, they are they kind of go with one another.
Right.
So just to explain the connection there.
Well, let me ask this: can we actually move those up directly after the authorizations so that we can keep them all together?
Yes, and the other thing I'll mention is I think we have talked about these items. It was a matter of awaiting some of the grant documents from the state and such that now we received. So even if it's the pleasure to make that consent agenda items,
well,
that's
with that
a possibility.
Yeah. So I mean, and I'm not sure if the board's had a chance to review the agreement terms and everything like that, but if you have, you want to add that as a consent agenda, along with the corresponding budget amendment, we can definitely do that. Okay. I'm seeing yeses.
Yeah.
Others.
I think you're saying we'll add it tonight to the consent agenda.
Correct.
Okay.
Right. So that would be item, where am I? Item 10. Nope, item 9 would go to the consent agenda. And correspondingly, item 20 would go to the consent agenda. That's just the budget amendment to recognize acceptance of the funds into the budget. Okay. Item 10 then is also, it's with our grant with the North Carolina Department of Agriculture, and that's the stream flow restoration grant for debris removal on Grants Creek that we were notified several months back that we had received. And so, again, this is the agreement. It's just a matter of executing that agreement. And subsequently, item 21 would be to accept, to amend the budget to accept those funds into this year's budget. So we want to add that to the consent agenda as well.
Yeah. Do
I
we
think
need
we
to
are
talk-
hard to talk about it.
Well,
Yeah,
I
I
will say
think so.
this: these items we have talked about
Okay.
several times during
Okay.
different meetings.
I'm sorry.
So no, you're fine. And if it's the
I just
pleasure of
want to
the
hear Joe
board,
talk.
And if y'all would like Joe to give an update on any of these this evening, he could do that too. I mean,
Yeah.
sure, Joe.
Yeah.
All right, that's good. I'll vote yes if that's the case. Because I got a question to ask you.
So, sort of in order, the Rural Transformation Grant is the $900,000 grant that we received from the North Carolina Department of Commerce that is specifically for the town park.
Right.
The budget for that project is about $2.4 million.
Right.
But we do have a phased budget that would allow us to do sort of a preliminary or sort of a base part and then add to it over time. However, we're kind of waiting, or we are waiting, by the end of August or early September is the timeline that we should hear from the Parks and Recreation Trust Fund. And we had applied for $500,000 for that same project. So we may have, within a short amount of time, hopefully a successful award. But in this case, we've been awarded the money. There's no matching fund required for the Rural Transformation Grant. I would recommend that you take the money and adopt the ordinance that would
put it into the budget and allow it to spend it at a later time. I think it's a 3-year window. I'm sure it's a 3-year window. So we don't have to do
2025.
anything. I'm sorry?
2025.
We don't have any immediacy, so to speak. So,
But what is the plan? That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm questioning. What is the plan of this? Is it just to do phase 1, or is it to complete the whole thing?
so I think sort of the general consensus is to be a little incremental. Wait till we know what the Parks and Recreation Funds
I
Fund
understand
tells
that.
us, and then based on that, we would have some program of revisiting some of our philanthropic community, and then potentially some additional fundraising.
So if you recall, I think we did designate some ARPA funding towards this.
Approximately 200,000.
Right. So that's a piece of it. As far as Spencer involvement, I feel confident about the $500,000 grant.
Right.
I think Joe feels good about it too. Assuming that we are successful with that, that's $1.4 million. And I feel confident at that point that we can go out to our philanthropic community and work very quickly to raise the money to make all of that happen. My preference, based on knowing that when you phase things, it costs more and it takes longer, that we work diligently. We spend our efforts trying to raise the additional funds and do it all as one complete project.
What do you think actually starting the project and getting it underway, like phase 1, would deter people contributing in the future?
I don't think so. I mean, I think you can look at it two ways. If you phase it, people may see the progress and want to do more to finish it.
Right.
But also when they see that we've raised $1.4 million in grant, and the town's willing to put $200,000.
I understand both sides of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's both sides. But
Yeah.
you look at it and people say, I know a lot of people here, the older people here say, well, are they going to do it? Just like everything else,
Yeah.
That's
Well,
my
and
concern.
one of the things I
wanna
think,
see it.
one of the things that we need to move forward with, we've got the conceptual design, is to go ahead and move forward very quickly with nailing down the final actual construction design.
I understand.
That'll probably be a 6-month process.
Yes. So, the sooner we can get that done, and we can concurrently be raising the money during the process of design.
But there's no reason once we adopt the rural transformation grant funds that we would have funds on hand to do the design, to get started immediately.
Right.
Well, let me ask you another question. This is a financial question. I'm not real great in finances, but this money that we're setting aside, you can't bear interest or anything on this as far as that goes.
No, we in this the rural transformation grant funds, as I understand it, and are the ARPA funds, are they distributed directly to us and then spent, or are they reimbursement?
No,
For ARPA.
The ARPA funds we received, and actually the interest that comes simply adds to it. So I don't know if.
So I don't really know the answer.
I
to your
imagine
question.
these would have similar something
That's
similar.
a lot of money.
Some of the grants are reimbursed as you
Right.
spend the money.
Yeah, I understand that.
But because the rural transformation grant funds are essentially ARPA funds,
Right.
I'm sensing that we would receive this. Okay. But I'll try to know by these days. That's true.
What I like that Steve is getting at, he's hinting at our theme for this year to run towards making things happen, right?
Spend money. That's what I say. Pat's got a big item she wants to bring up later on.
So we could get the funds and buy Mega Million lottery tickets with it or something like that.
No.
Okay.
Too fancy.
Yeah, that didn't work out too well
That
for
didn't
me
work
on
out.
Friday. No.
No, my tickets didn't even come close.
All right.
Okay, and then the other item, the stream flow restoration grant. Now that is I know for a fact that is a reimbursement based project, but the way it's set up is the town of Spencer is receiving $280,000 we're essentially targeting 11,000 linear feet along Grants Creek, roughly between 3rd Street and 7th Street, and then beyond, going past the Standback Educational Forest. And if we have planned properly, we would be able to extend even beyond the educational forest. And so, in that particular grant program is to remove woody debris from the 100-year floodplain. And as I've mentioned in a previous meeting, we're working with Rowan County because they have received the grant. The Soil and Water Conservation District has received the grant, and they're going to work with us on the bid documents, and hopefully we will get a better, more competitive pricing by having a larger project. It'll be distinct projects, but the funds will be reimbursed to us. The contractor will submit a bill, and it's in the grant agreement where there's a 30-day turnaround that they submitted a bill, and then 30 days later they get paid for the work that
it's kind of, I didn't understand whether the deadline was, they said it was February 2023, and then it said something about 2025 that they
So
It has to be started by February 2020.
that's right.
okay,
We
I
have to be under contract.
And what I was concerned about was a lot of people have got, I don't know how many, they call it vendors, but it's actually contractors.
Yes.
That's going to be, I question whether you can be able to find a contractor to do something like this.
It's going to be forestry guys, people who typically harvest trees and
So
do
it's
land
loggers
clearing
and
activities. It's
yeah.
the same equipment. We're fortunate that we have both the Salisbury Rowan utility right of way and the Duke Energy right of way along our section of
Along the
Grants
river.
Creek, and so we have some opportunities for cross access on those rights of way that will make it simple, I think, for our contractors to get.
Yeah, because that was the next thing I was thinking about, right of ways and people getting to own those properties,
Right.
whether they had to go through property owners, but we do have
And,
right of ways.
and we'll coordinate with every parcel owner along
Yeah.
the route. We've got to get through this sort of first part of getting the agreement settled,
Yeah, I
and
understand
then we'll coordinate with everybody, and there'll be a lot of communication with property owners, but primarily we're going to use the Salisbury Rowan utility right away to access it, and it's a benefit to everybody. And if you think about this just a little bit, we're sort of cleaning out the lower part of our drainage basin. We have all our tributaries drain toward Grants Creek, and so we're getting the woody debris out of the main channel so that as we do repairs in the future, hopefully the flow will be better.
I really think it's good that we're working with the county, because I hate for us to clean our section of the lake, or of streams and everything else, and then our section right above us, all of a sudden the next heavy flood would, deposit some of their trash
Right.
into and what
Right.
we're doing as far as
And so I'm not going to get this exactly right, but there was more than 10 times
That's
the
right.
applications for the amount of funding that was available. And
The
so
funding
there is
was
a pent up
32
demand.
million, and they had over 320 million in requests, I
Right.
think. Yeah.
And so we were fortunate to be funded in this cycle, but I fully expect that this will demonstrate to the General Assembly that this is a much needed project for the statewide.
That's good.
So
That's
hopefully
good.
there'll be more of it, and people will be asking us for advice on how to get it done. But to go to your earlier point, I started getting emails immediately
Did you really?
from companies that want to bid
Contractors?
on it.
Really?
Oh yeah, like we're interested in bidding on your project.
Well, that's good,
Right.
because I was kind of concerned about the lack of time, because you're looking at less than a year to kind of get things rolling, or at least hire a contractor, it looks like. Or
No, we'll have plenty of time to
Okay.
get our project.
That's fine. That's fine.
This all started out because of flooding down east after the hurricanes, and
That's
they
correct.
took a look at it and said, if we can do something upstream, maybe we can alleviate some of the problems that are occurring in the mountains and the coast.
It's everywhere.
Yeah, just look at Kentucky right now.
Yeah.
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 That's right.
Okay.
But thank you for putting that on the consent agenda. I'll be quiet during the meeting.
Thank you for giving us an update and for your work on making both of those happen. Okay. All right, so that means items 9 and 10 and 20 and 21 will be on our consent agenda. All right, the next is item 11. That's to consider approving the fiscal year 23 audit contract with RH CPAs. So we will get an update on that on Tuesday. I would say we obviously wait until and actually keep this as a regular agenda item because I believe we have a meeting tomorrow scheduled with their partners to discuss everything that has transpired
Next year's contract.
with this past year's budget, and
So it's still not finished?
it is finished.
It is.
It is finished.
It has been.
And the LGC has accepted
Yes.
Okay.
it.
we're
So that
okay.
is done, but we have called a meeting to talk with their partners tomorrow about our expectations if the board chooses to renew their contract or have a contract with them for next year, our expectations of what the process needs to look like and how it needs to be different than this past year.
So this RH CPA are the people we've been dealing with. Is that correct?
Right.
So we're thinking about the possibility of renewing a contract for next year. Is that sure?
We're going to run out of time because this has to be started. It's supposed to be done by October, is it not?
Yes.
Started.
Yeah.
The standard
Correct,
deadline is
because-
October 31st.
That's right. Yep.
So yes, we are in a position due to the timing that
We don't have a lot of choices.
not really, but I will say we are planning this discussion with them. They are planning to attend the meeting via Zoom next week, and then the other thing to keep in mind with our audits in general is going into the at this time next year and actually starting in January, regardless of where we are in the audit process, we will need to do an RFP going into the next cycle for the FY 23 audit because we're going to be moving into the single audit category with all these federal dollars that we are not in even for we were not for fiscal year 21. We're not going to be for fiscal year 22 in that category, but for fiscal year 23 we will, and so we will do an RFP so that this time next year we'll be selecting an auditor based on that process.
I think we should put a stipulation in this where there's a penalty if they go past a certain period of time, and like it does for highway construction, charge them so much per day
Liquidated
until
damages.
they finish it.
The question is it too late to try to interview other companies as far as that goes?
Probably.
The short answer is probably yeah.
I don't-
Yeah.
This is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Well, and there are not very many audit
I
companies
understand
across
that.
the state that take on this sort of
And again,
thing.
we remember. I mean, there was a litany of issues related to the delays this past year, but one of those was having to digitize the records, and so obviously that will not have to happen this year. So that's one of the things we're going to talk with them about tomorrow.
Certainly.
So anyway.
We have a young woman who's been assigned to us. She's part of the 40 under 40 for Forsyth County, I think. And I looked up information about them today after looking at the contract again.
All right. So we'll get an update with that, and obviously on Tuesday you'll have the contract before you for consideration. Okay. All right. So items 12 and 13, we will keep those. Those are the items that we heard the public comment or the hearings on this evening. Same for item 14. And same for item 15. All right, and so then item 16, we will get an update on our auto restoration business at 200 South Salisbury Avenue. So Mr. Blunt will give us an update on everything that's transpired over the past month relative to that. I would love to. Unfortunately, I don't think we can.
Very good.
The next item is to consider approving ordinance 22-019 to close a single lane, the single southbound lane, outside southbound lane of US 29, basically from the Yadkin River down to Kane Street for a 5K event as part of Rowan Creek Week. And that is an event that the town I've been planning with Rowan Creek Week and the Soil and Water Conservation District.
From the river to Kane Street.
The race will start back here on Yadkin at Central Methodist, and it will go out Yadkin to Kane Street. It will turn on Kane Street, and then it will go down 29 out to the river. And the intent was to get everything past Jefferson Street, since the Transportation Museum will be hosting Thomas the Train that weekend.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so we wanted to be sure.
Juggling those events.
Good planning.
But we wanted to be sure that we got past Jefferson for any of the traffic folks coming and going from the Transportation Museum. My recommendation would be to add that to the consent agenda, unless you want me to be long-winded and talk about it, or Kyle, as he's coordinating the event permit on Tuesday.
We don't want to hear you talk, because then
I don't want to hear me talk. No. Thanks. All right, next item is to consider adopting regulatory compliance plan conforming with federal and state regulations governing the CDBG program. And this will be Kyle's section of the agenda. So we will get an update from him on Tuesday on that. That'll be a regular agenda item. And then we will have Sky with us. She is back from her month-long sabbatical. And she will join us and give us an update relative to application for grants for mural projects throughout the town. Okay. Next, we'll have the discussion that Mr. Miller asked about the fire department expansion planning and design. We've added the next two items to the consent agenda. And then we have a property lien for consideration. And as we've been doing with most meetings, that suggests that we add that to the consent agenda if the board is agreeable.
Good.
Okay. We'll then receive departmental reports, town manager reports, and then we'll have comments by the mayor and board members. And if there is any need for executive session on Tuesday, we can go into executive session. Is there anything at this point that we need to add, or anything we need to do to modify the agenda for Tuesday?
Lisa, you need to take a take.
Yeah, in the sledge, that's for tonight's. This is for tonight's meeting.
Oh.
This is
Sorry.
the pre-agenda agenda.
Sorry. Okay.
Okay, anything else? Okay. Is there any need tonight to go into executive session? All right, hearing none. We are at the end of our agenda, so take a motion for adjournment. Motion by Mr. Muhammad.
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Morgan. All in favor? All right, all opposed? Okay, we stand adjourned. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.